Hi class. What I wanted to go over this morning is how to present your work. One of the things that you need to understand is that when people are looking at your work is as good as the weakest aspect of it. Okay. You're going to be putting a portfolio together. So the presentation and how you present your work is as important as the work itself. Okay. Because if you have really good work, but you do a really crappy presentation of it, then it's crappy work. Okay. But if you do decent work, not great work, but you do decent work, but you do a great job of presenting it, then it'll be viewed as a great piece of work. So you need to take the time and learn how to do good presentations. What I find is that a lot of my students do bad presentations. They do pretty decent work, but they just slough off the presentations. They don't care how they're presenting their work. I care how you present your work, because the more that you present it in a bad way, you're kind of training yourself that it's not important. So I strive in my classes to make sure that you understand that how you present the work to me is very important to me, because that's training yourself to be able to understand that how you present your work, that's what's going to get a potential employer to get to the stage where they really want to delve into your work, because your presentations are very tight. Okay. Now, in a texturing class, one of the things that you're going to be doing is unwrapping your work. When you unwrap it, then you're going to need to present to me, okay, so that I can evaluate it to help you get better at it. You need to present a couple of things to me. One of the things you need to present to me is the actual unwrap, so that I can see how, what it looks like once you've unwrapped it and how you're packing it in the space. But then the other thing I need to see is I need to see a checkerboard pattern on the object so I can see where the stretching is. When I look inside of the UV unwrap window, that doesn't show me stretching. I need to see the stretching when it's on the object. So I need a checker pattern put on the object. Then that also shows me pixel density. Pixel density is making sure that we understand that when we're painting our texture maps, that we want the quality of the texture map to be the same on every object. Okay. So when you're presenting it to me, I need to see two things. I need to see the actual unwrap. That could be just a screen grab of the unwrap out of your unwrap window. And then the other thing I need to see is the model with the checker pattern on it. So that's what I want to do today, is kind of go through how I would do a presentation of a model so that it's a nice, clean presentation that's easy for anybody to evaluate and see the quality of the work that you've done. Okay, so let's get to it. Okay, so what I have here is it's a character lump that we're actually going to surface in one of my classes. It's just an example file. So we've got the character's shirt and his pants. Okay, and we've unwrapped these. Now, one of the things that I do to kind of prep the actual screen, okay, because there's certain things that I want to actually be able to do, is I'm going to be able to take screen grabs of this character, and then I'm going to put him together in Photoshop, okay? It's kind of a pain having this gradient in the background, so I want it to have a solid color in the background. So if I go right up here and right-click where this says shaded right here, I can pull down to where it says viewport background, and I can turn this to a solid color, and that's better for me. Now, the color is a nice medium gray, and that's fine. You can actually go into preferences and change that, but for what it is, it's fine, okay? And you can do a similar thing to this in Maya. Maya has a gradient in the background, but you can actually go into Maya and you can switch that off as well. In Maya, Alt-B on the keyboard, Alt-B cycles through a different color background. It has the gradient background, which is kind of a dark to a blue in the background, and then Alt-B will turn it black, and if you hit Alt-B to green again, it'll turn to gray, so you cycle through three, and you can actually go in and alter what those colors are, but the default colors are fine. So I would tell you to we don't want a black background. It hurts. We can't see our shading on our object, so you want gray. Maya's is a little bit lighter gray. That's fine. So just Alt-B and cycle through till you get a solid gray background, because we're going to be doing screen grabs, okay? And then we want to be able to cut these out. Now, another thing that I do in Max that kind of drives me at the wall is Max has got a new thing in here that when you click on an object, it highlights it and puts the wireframe on it. Okay, and a lot of people like that. I don't like that at all. because there are times where I want to be able to have the object selected and I do not want to see the wireframe. And there's no way to do that with default settings in Macs. And these are new settings. They changed them like in 2015. So I turn this off. Where do you get that to turn that off? Is you go right here where this says shaded, you right click and you pull down to where this says display selected, and you uncheck this button right here. Display was selected with the edge faces. You turn that off. So that'll allow me to pick something and it not have the highlight on it. Now, if I want the highlight, F4 will turn the wireframe on and off. Okay. So I can have wireframe on, and then I can turn it off with F4. Now, an example of that is there are times where I might want to be putting a subdivision on this. So I might want to put a mesh smooth on this, and I want to be able to see the smoothing and what it's doing to the geometry not being hidden by the wireframe. So I like to turn that off, but that's totally up to you. Another thing, just so you know, is I'll turn it back on for right now. Is that you can permanently turn it off. Okay, that is just turns it off on this file, but I can actually go into here and go to my configure button right here. And on this visual appearance tab, here is the button. And if you turn this off and click OK, this turns this off permanently. Okay, so now every time I launch Macs, I don't have to turn that off because that's set it into the preferences. I can always set it back. But if you don't set it to the preferences, every time you open Macs, then it's going to go and you're going to have to turn that off every time. Okay. Now it's just a personal preference. That's up to you. You don't have to do that. Okay. So here is our character. Okay. Now this character's already been unwrapped. And so we'll just pick it and we'll open up our UV editor. Okay. And here's our editor. Okay. Okay, so all I need to do here is just open up this editor, and then I'll do a screen grab of it, okay? Now, when I do my screen grab, I have a double monitor. You can't see it, I have a double monitor. So if I hit print screen, it's going to grab both of my monitors. So what I want to do is hit Alt print screen. If I hit Alt print screen, then it only grabs the window that is active, okay? So when I open up Photoshop, I want to make a new file to paste it in, okay? So you can go File, New, but you ought to get used to some speed keys. And the speed key for a new file is Control-N. So Control-N will make yourself a new file. And what it will do is read. It understands what we've grabbed in the buffer, okay? And so it will automatically size itself to the size that I need to paste that into, okay? And there we go. I've pasted that window in there. All right. Okay, so we'll go back over here to Max. So I've grabbed that so that I can use that later to edit with, to go do my presentation. So I'm going to go back to Max here, and we'll just close that. So now I want this ready to present to, so we can kind of evaluate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a mesh smooth on this. Okay, and if I put it on both of them at the same time, then I can control it on both of them, okay? And so I'm going to go ahead and hit my F4. And so now it's got a nice smooth appearance, the way it would be once it's subdivided. And now I want to put a material on it, okay? So we're going to go click on Material Editor. And then we want to put a shader on it. I'm going to right click and I'm go to Material, Standard, and get a standard shader. Now, I don't use standard shaders much, but for things like this, when I'm actually texturing, I don't use these. These are old, but they're, for what we're doing right here, they're fine. Okay, so in the diffuse, I'm going to go to standard and I'm going to put a checker on here. Now, in Max, in order to see the checker, you have to click this button right here, Show Material in the Viewport. Then you will be able to see the checker on our object, okay? Now, we haven't placed our shader on our object yet. So what we'll do is, there's two ways to do that. One way is to click and drag and drop like that. That's one way to put it on there, okay? But that only puts it on the one object, okay? If I have both the objects picked, I can right click on right here and assign, and then it will assign to both of them. All right, you can see how that, that pattern is not very It's not helping us see stretching on it because the pattern by default is too big, okay? So double click on the checker and here's its attributes, okay? And I would say normally if you've packed it right, it'll be somewhere between 40 and 60. And of course we want the same thing in both numbers because we want it to be perfect squares. And then I can see our pixel density, okay? I can see any kind of stretching that would be in it. I can see, if I rotate around this, you know, if there's any kind of stretching. I can see if the pixel density is off. You can see the pixel density is a little bit off here, okay? But that's okay as long as it's close. It doesn't have to be perfect, it's close, okay? All right, so this is how we would want to show this character, okay? So what we're going to do here is I'm going to come in, and now what I would tell you is, you know, what you probably want to first do is go ahead and look at it from the front viewport. And I'm using my zoom extents down here, which is the second row up, second button in down here in the bottom right, and that'll zoom in on the character. Now, your center mouse button does zooming, okay, but the problem with it, it does it in steps, okay? You've got a zoom button down here, which allows you to click and it'll zoom around the mouse and you can get a really nice zoom in here. All right, so now what I'm going to do is get my orbit tool down here, okay? And I always click inside of the circle, never outside of the circle, and I can kind of orbit around. Now, that's the same thing as holding the Alt key down and the center mouse button and dragging it, okay? Now, when I do this, it puts us into an orthographic view, which is kind of a distorted view. We really want a perspective view, which is a type of camera view. So if I right-click right here, I can go to perspective, or you'll see that P is the speed key, okay? So if I hit P on the keyboard, that'll switch me to a perspective view. I go down here and I get my zoom button and I zoom back enough. I want it as big as I possibly can get it inside of my area, okay? Now, it'll have, especially if I'm on the move, it'll have a little icon in here. So what I really want to do is deselect it before I do my screen grab so that that icon is not on here, okay? Now, another thing I see people having all the time is they have the bounding boxes on, okay? Max looks at an object, most 3D programs, by what is the smallest box it'll fit in, okay? In Max, J on the keyboard will turn the bounding box off. We don't want the bounding box to be shown when we do a screen grab. So I'm going to, you can see the little icon on there, so I'm going to deselect, okay? Now, there may be times where I want to see the wireframe on there, okay? So I can select it, okay? I can hit F4, that'll show the wireframe. Then deselect. Now, a lot of times I want the wireframe in a presentation to be white. I normally don't want them to be white because things turn white, and if I have them white, they turn white when we select them. And if I have them white, I can't tell if I've selected anything. But a lot of times if I'm trying to show the wireframe, what I'll do is go up to this little box right here, which is the color of our wire, not the color shader, and I'll turn it to white and click OK. Now I can deselect, and I've got the pattern and I've got a wireframe on it. Okay, so there are times that I want to do that. I'm not going to do it in this presentation, but there are times I'm going to do this. I have a tendency to want it to be black, black wireframe. The ones I would tell you to never use is you never want to use white, because when we select something, it turns white. So if you have a white on it, we can't tell if we picked it or not. You never want to use a gray, because gray is when we freeze something, it turns gray, and so we can't tell if something's frozen. And the other thing that you would never want to use is red, because when we select at a sub-object level, things turn red, so you can't tell if you're selecting with a sub-object. So I would stay away from gray, white, and red, but any other color is fine to use. Now, by default, Max has this button checked on right here, assign random colors, which means every time I make something, it gives me this smorgasbord, you know, Neapolitan multicolors. I don't really like that, so I turn that off, and I prefer my objects to be black, okay? Now, that'll run you into a little bit of problem when you first start, because that means that anytime we're creating something, so let's go to our front view here where I've created this sphere, it is black, okay? And I see people do this all the time, where they'll come in here and they'll say, oh, well, I don't want it to be black, so you're going to go in here. No, this is not the color of the object. This is the color of the wireframe, okay? So you need to put a shader on it. So we bring up the material editor, and then we put a shader on it, okay? So we can sign that. And so what I have is a black wireframe with a gray object on it. Okay. And that's how you should be working. Okay. Okay. So let's bring our character back up here. Okay. And so I'm going to tumble him, and then I'm going to hit P again. And so we'll zoom in, get him as big as I can get him. And I want to be kind of a 3/4 view. And then let's put our checker back on. And so there's our nice pattern. I'm going to turn my wireframe off, deselect him, and then that's a nice screen grab. So I'm holding on Alt, print screen. And so then when I go over to Photoshop, okay, and I make a new file, Control N, click OK, new file, and then paste, and then there it's pasted in there, okay. And I'm making a layered file that I'm going to put several of these in, okay. So now I want to show another view of this, okay. So I'm going to go Orbit. And I'm going to grab the little box here, which will just rotate him around. Now, notice I'm not rotating him. I'm rotating my view. We don't want to rotate him. We want to keep him straight on. So I'll need to zoom back just a little bit, move it up. Okay. Then there's another good screenshot. Alt, print screen. Taking back into Photoshop and paste. So we got another layer of him in here. Okay. And then I'm going to do one more shot of him. So I'm going to rotate around again. This other side, something maybe about like that. Alt print screen. Back to Photoshop and paste. Okay, so now I have 3 shots of him. Okay, so I'm going to go to this one. And now I'm going to come in and I'm just going to grab a box that's just big enough to select around him. Okay, and then copy and paste, Control C for copy, Control V for paste, paste it right on there. Okay, so then I'm going to do the same thing to every one of these. Control C, Control V, go to this one. Control C, Control V, okay. Now what I want to do is my background, I want to fill with this dark gray that's in here. Okay, so I just need to sample this color. Okay, and then I go to my background and I fill it. Now to fill with the color, it's Alt Delete, fills with your foreground color. Okay, you'll see I have a foreground color of that dark gray and I've got a green in here. So Control Delete fills with your background color, Alt Delete fills with your foreground color. So now I can come in here and I can turn these screen grabs on and you'll see they'll seem like they're just floating on here. Okay, so now I'm going to move this up. Say right there. I'm going to take my next one. I'm going to move this up right about there. Use my arrow keys if I need to move them a little bit. And then my third one here. Okay. And so there's 3 nice views of my character so that I can have anybody evaluate what that looks like. Now, I want to put in my presentation, I want to put my unwrap as well. So what I'm going to do is I want to need some room down here and I'm going to put it below it. Okay. So what I want to do is go to image, canvas size. Okay. I'm going to go change it to percent and I'm going to say make it 200% and I'm going to click my anchor at the top. So it's going to add space at the bottom and click OK. Now it'll default to, won't necessarily make the color we want. So all I have to do now is have that background picked, Alt Delete, and that'll fill that with that gray. Okay. So now I have extra space around here to put the rest of my presentation. So I'm going to go to this piece, okay, and I'm just going to drag and drop it on here, okay. Now I'm going to put it up above all of these, so it's floating above. Now, I don't really need this whole window, okay. I just need the part where it's the unwrap. And so I'm just going to grab that portion of it to show the unwrap. And be sure you get the whole piece. Don't cut your pieces off. Okay. So with that, I can do the same thing. Control C, Control V. And now I can turn that off. And now I just have this piece. Okay. So I can select it and I can drop it down below here. Okay. All right. Now I can crop this. So I can come in with my crop tool. Okay. Now I don't like the old this new crop tool that that Photoshop has. I don't like this. Some people do. I don't. Okay. So right up here, you can click and use classic mode. Okay. And then what it will do is, allow me to use the old mode where I can just drag and crop the area I want. Okay. Now I'm going to leave a little extra space at the bottom. Okay. Now, that's a nice size presentation there. Okay. And I can see can you see a little pin line around the edge? Okay. I'm all about the presentation. I don't like that little pin line. So I'm going to come in here and delete that off. Come in here and delete that one off. Okay. So a nice presentation. Now you can do some other things in here if you want to. You could come into here and actually put a drop shadow on this. So we could double click on Photoshop. We could put a little bit of a drop shadow underneath it if we wanted to. I don't want too much of a drop shadow. I don't want to look, I don't want it to scream at me, go, oh, look, they've got a drop shadow on it. Okay. It's just something to separate it a little bit. So I'm going to turn down so it's not very noticeable. A lot of times I might also put a stroke on it, a slight little stroke around it to separate it a little bit. Okay. You don't want your stroke too big, maybe about 2 pixels, and that will separate this a little bit. And then that's a pretty nice presentation. So now I can see, anybody that's looking at it can see where you're having stretching, what your pixel density is. We can see how you're unwrapping it. We want as few pieces as possible. We want them packed as tightly as possible. And then the last thing I'm going to do is put a little bit of a branding on this. So I have a little, has my name on it, so I might want to do something like that. And then I think I might crop it a little bit more on there. And so now that's a nice presentation. You can put that presentation up, and now anybody that looks at this can see all the information they want on you unwrapping something. They can see the pixel density. They can see stretching. They can see how you've packed it, how you've unfolded. All of the information that anybody would need to know to evaluate this is all in this one presentation. You've done a professional presentation. This kind of presentation could be put in your portfolio as well, okay? Because one of the things that people want to see is not just your end product, but they want to see how you did your product. They want to see how well you can pack your stuff. So a lot of times students just think, oh, it's all about the end product. No, it's about the process. It's about how you did what you did, because that, your end product tells me about something about you as an artist, but it doesn't tell me anything about you as a problem solver. When you show process, then it shows me more in depth of your personality and how you work and how you, solve the problems of being able to get what you want. And that tells me a lot about you as a person. So when I want to hire somebody, yes, I want to know they're a good artist, but I also want to know that how they solve problems, what kind of problem solver they are. Okay, and then you would post this up. Okay. All right, so hopefully that it helps you with that, because it's so important to be able to do a good presentation, to always put your best foot forward, to be able to show people that you're conscientious about every little detail. I mean, the way you need to think of it is you want people to understand that if they give you the job and they give you the project, that you will do whatever it takes to make sure it is as quality as possible, not just what you're creating, but creating presentations, because we have to present presentations to clients and we want everything to be professional. Okay. All right. So hopefully that helped you out. Thank you very much.